Right. Mortis Fest is finally upon us here in Sigil, and the Ragtags are celebrating it with costumes. Gnomish candy, dancing, and drinking. But also, well, they're going to the fighting pit, aren't they? Yeah, the fighting pit. So, are you ready to hear the rest of the tale? Then let us commence. Let's backtrack to a few days before the festival, when the Ragtags had a run-in/unscheduled meeting with members of the mage mob who showed up at the Gentle Snare asking around for them. Remember? The somewhat smarmy faceman of the group assured everyone that they were there in good faith, and not to cross swords and blast each other and the like. Turns out the visitors were there to offer the heroes a job. And it was another Bobby Dazzler. This one involved a jailbreak on carcery targeting an infamous mage prison. Pay would be great, of course. And there would be the chance of spoils too. A couple of not-so-great points were that the mission would be run with a second team consisting of members of the mage mob. And, well, the prison definitely sounded pretty high level. Like, even prisoners' ghosts couldn't escape the place, so... yeah. Not just a walk in the park, right? Leaving our friends with some time to think about it all, the strange collection of gangsters took their leave. Huh. I mean, we still don't know what any of their names are. What the real name of the mage mob is. Who even is the boss of the mage mob? Ugh. A lot of unanswered, and, well, unasked questions. But who am I to say? The Ragtags are the adventurers here, not me. When there was a moment, Varys decided to ask the snarky scrap of parchment he has. Quote, "I'm a genius who can figure this out on my own. But I'm wondering your take. Now that we have our dimensional detector, and we're looking for that solar egg, what places and things would you start with?" And the scrap snarkily replied,
"I know I'm merely a snarky scrap of parchment, though a fabulously fetching red-inked one, I do admit. And far be it from me to point out something so blatantly obvious to one gifted with such a profound and infinite intellect as yourself, but, well, don't you have a lead about this that's just been dangling there for weeks now, darling? Perhaps the magic answer to your solar egg hunt, a quest that is probably, not as important as you are imagining, I might add, can be found there. At the very least, you can poke and prod about with your weird pointy doodad thingy and maybe learn where various items of furniture and carpeting come from. Also, though I'm sure your geniusness would have completed such an obviously essential task already, I would suggest maybe going back to the beginning of all of the things that have happened since your little egg went missing, and take whatever new information and clues and context you now have, and carefully overlay it all, and then set that expansive intellect loose to see if any new revelations shall reveal themselves. Again, I am a simple scrap of parchment who is just lucky enough to be illuminated in the radiance of your godlike intellect once a week, darling. I'm sure you will figure it all out, and correctly, of course, as you no doubt have been all along and all the time, every time. With every clue and lead you have since the beginning of all of this. Right?
Definitely snarky, but probably some good advice in there. At another point in the few days leading up to Mortis Fest, Varys again reached out to the mysterious and wanted Aasimar terrorist, and let her know that he was sympathetic to her cause, though not fully knowing what the cause actually was, or if there even was a cause to be sympathetic to. And that he was something of a cage breaker himself. He received no reply. On the morning of Mortis Fest, the Ragtags rose early, packed their things and put on their costumes. That's right, the heroes managed to put together some fun and festive attire for the proceedings, including a necromantic pair of skeletons to augment Varys' own skeleton costume, some whizzer clockwork spider legs for Drogon, a dark though chic and distinguished set of formal wear for Unia, an elegant and moody toga with a cowl for Devrina, a raven-themed outfit for the bird-loving Braze, Meanwhile, Regal had a really heavy and impressive-looking black cloak he wrapped around himself. Seemed as though he was hiding a lot of his costume. I guess we'll see what his costume is when the time is right. Leaving the Gentle Snare, the companions were heading to the carnival to meet with its leader Isolde for breakfast. Just as a quick reminder, the Ragtags were hitching a ride with the carnival to the dread domain of Darkon, where Answers would introduce them to the crime lord Mordrin Slake, the man who hired Answers to put their unconscious stasis tank-contained bodies on an airship just a few weeks ago. So this was an introductory breakfast, as Answers had dealt with the carnival, and Isolde before. The carnival was set up on one end of the Mortis Fest grounds. Its appearance seemed innocent enough, an eclectic mix of brightly coloured tents and wagons, strung with lanterns that emit a ghostly flickering glow. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and smoke. There was a market just on the fringe of the carnival grounds with a sign calling it Litwick Market. The Ragtags made their way through but suddenly found that the various fey creatures that had stalls in the place called out to them by their names, offering them, well, their heart's desires. A blue hag named Shady Emma offered to tell Varys everything about what happened to the hero since going to sleep one night and waking up in tanks on a crashing airship. The price was all of his memories of what happened since, plus a good portion of his intellect and experience. Surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly to some, Varys mulled the offer over but ultimately moved along with his brain intact. In the carnival proper, there was an ambience of eerie music echoing through the grounds, though no one could really say who was playing the music or where it was actually coming from. The atmosphere pulsed with an undercurrent of mystery and dread, where shadows stretched unnaturally and nothing stayed still for long. Though the friends did linger a bit at the so-called Hall of Horrors, where they were intrigued by a brain in a jar that, when Brace touched the glass, emitted an empathic resonance that was nothing but unbridled rage and simmering vengeance. It's a brain in a jar, so, yeah, I get it. The Hall of Horrors was run by one Professor Picali, and was apparently a collection of various paranormal and parascientific outliers and, freaks that was called Professor Picali's Pickled Punks. The heroes arrived at Isolde's tent and met the enigmatic Eladrin, leader of the carnival. While somewhat off-putting and mysterious, Isolde was also incredibly charming and seemed to be more than truthful and honest about everything. Over breakfast, Isolde explained that the carnival would be leaving that night at 2 a.m. sharp, and that they would, eventually, after a few stops, find their way to Darkon, where the Ragtags would be free to leave. In exchange for the transport, she only asked that they do their part around the carnival, which seemed to mean chores of various types. So overall, that seemed unspecific, but probably doable. Isolde took an interest in Regal's sword and asked to see it. In exchange, she let the haunted suit of armor examine her own greatsword, Nepenthe, an impressive red steel weapon. When Regal held the blade, he was beset with a vision where he was pursued by someone or something, but eventually began to hunt the entity and eventually, with Nepenthe, battled his foe and defeated them, finally seeing who they were. The slain enemy was Regal, though it was Regal before he had become a haunted suit of armor. Isolde seemed very interested in what happened, saying that something pursued Regal. She offered the blade to Devrina, and surprisingly, when the good-natured fawn took the blade in her hands, she seemed to have a terrifying and harrowing experience that made her scream at the end of it. She didn't seem to want to share what she saw, though she said everything was fine. Unia, perhaps wisely, declined inspecting the sword. Isolde took note of that. Reminding the heroes they needed to be back at the carnival for 2 a.m. No exceptions. Isolde took her leave and the Ragtags headed into Mortis Fest proper. They quickly signed up for the fighting pit, where they would test their mettle against 4 other adventuring teams. In the meantime, they wandered about soaking in the ambience of Mortis Fest. Put on annually by the Heralds of Dust, aka the Dustmen, Sigil's morticians, but also the faction that believes that we are all already dead and must attain the true death, that final nothingness beyond existence as we know it. Or something. I mean, I think that's the gist of what those blighters are going on about. It's all pretty morose and emo, innit? Anyway, Mortis is a sort of Day of the Dead where everyone could celebrate death and by extension, of course, its flip side, life. Mortis Fest is held in Blackshade Lane in the Hive near the mortuary, the headquarters of the Heralds, and people came from all over Sigil to enjoy the macabre festivities. It was actually one of the few times of year where people from other wards even thought about or considered the Hive ward, and hundreds jumped in a portal to check it out. Wandering about, the heroes encountered the Parade of Vigils, one of the main attractions of the festival. The parade was made mostly of the Dustman's undead thralls, who walked in a procession carrying various candles and funerary paraphernalia, winding its way through the festival. It began at dawn and moved around the festival site all day until transitioning into the lantern procession in the evening. The skeletons bear black banners covered in the names of the recently deceased. Onlookers are encouraged to add names of their lost loved ones to the banners, and it is said that doing so grants the deceased peace in their afterlife. The parade also acted as a symbolic reminder that death is always surrounding us and moving through life in the background, whether we notice it or not. As the friends enjoyed the festival, Varys noticed that someone was following them from a distance in the crowds. Braze was able to notice who it was and used minor image to show everyone what the man looked like. Regal seemed shocked by the image and immediately wanted the man found. Drogon climbed a nearby building and spotted the man leaving the festival grounds, but he entered an alley and teleported away or disappeared in some other manner. While obviously quite shaken up by whomever the person was, Regal was able to move on when he saw that there was a Bim Bibbins gnomish candy stall at the festival, with exciting Mortis Fest edition flavours too, and the candy heiress herself, Jacintra Beth Bim Bibbins, was giving out samples from an always-loaded candy blaster. She even recognised the heroes from their friendly encounter in a bar in Plague Moor. At one point in the early afternoon, the Ragtags saw Lilith, the succubus owner of the Gentle Snare, wandering the festival grounds. Before they could say hello, Lilith quickly and inconspicuously met with a couple of very obvious devils, and accepted something that very much looked like a fat coin purse from them. Given Lilith's abyssal origins, taking money from Infernalborn seemed strange indeed. Just then, a woman yelled out, "Stop!" as a young teenage girl ran off with a chain of sausages she had taken from the lady's butcher stall. As the Harmonium began to intervene, the Ragtags did just enough to let the girl escape down an alley. To his shock, Varys noticed that the girl transformed into a dog and ran off down the lane. Continuing through the ever more crowded festival, the Ragtags ran into Lysandra the Gateseeker, who was there with a couple of her Nexium Argentis colleagues. Celinda Darman, whom they all knew, and a mage they hadn't met before named Avarit. Avarit specialised in several schools of magic, including Dunamancy, Chronomancy, and Graviturgy. He took an immediate interest in Regal and asked if he could examine him when there was time. Regal agreed. Later, an intimidating pair of mercy killers approached and told the Ragtags to meet with investigator Arahala, who was sitting in the little patio of the Mortis Festival pop-up of everyone's favourite Sigil skewer chain, Lil Durkee's. The unblinking Aasimar mercy killer asked for a progress report on the leads she had given them before their adventures in Sylvania, mainly the missing map of Wildspace and the ancient skull from the Susurium, and was surprised that neither lead had even come close to being followed up on, given how keen everyone had been about them. She also seemed to indicate that the Ragtags' old friends, the Goliath barbarian Thera Rainwanderer and the tiefling scientist Dr. Medrix, were up to something in the Undersigil. In the end, the heroes had to send Arahala on her way without any new information or leads or, well, anything really. Then it was time for the fighting pit. At the northwestern edge of the festival grounds, there was the slightly rickety old Colosseum of the Gunungsin, the Hive Ward's local fighting pit. Mortis Fest was always the busiest day of the year for the Colosseum, and the stands were already packed and buzzing with anticipation when the heroes arrived an hour before the battles. In the fever dream of the pre-show, the Ragtags saw that the event was surprisingly big budget, with Fraternity of Order-approved healers on hand, as well as a crew of wizards, bards and clerics for various types of support, special effects, music and other augmentations to the already exciting occasion. The rules were simple. Well, sort of. Groups of 5 to 8 fighters register and pay an entry fee of 20 gold pieces per fighter. The contest consists of 3 cycles, each of increasing difficulty and challenge. A fighting group faces off against and tries to clear/defeat one of the simulated creature encounters presented to them in a cycle. Surviving a cycle earns a group 300 gold pieces, while falling in battle during a cycle results in the group's elimination from the tournament. Any teams that finish all 3 cycles win their 900 gold, but also get a share of 4,000 gold pieces. A cycle is approximately 15 seconds. At the end of a cycle, if all enemies are defeated, the fighters will get 1 minute to recover and heal. However, if at the end of a cycle there are still enemies left, the next cycle will begin and fighters will have to battle the previous foes who remain, as well as the new ones, and that is the same for the 3rd round as well. The 3rd cycle goes until all enemies or the fighters are down. The Ragtags wound up being the first team to go, and soon they got into position under the pit and were raised up on an elevator-like platform. It was here that Regal unveiled his costume. You'll remember that the costume featured a thick, unnaturally heavy-looking black cloak completely enveloping the suit of armor and trailing on the ground. Regal finally unveiled what was underneath. When opened, his armor had been glamoured to show glittering stars and swirling galaxies, with an illusion making parts of the armor appear to be invisible in an unpredictable pattern, showing hints of a glowing green skeleton. And the crowning achievement. Over his head is a halo-like crown, lit with a sparking white flame that evaporates into the air above him. The crowd went wild, and pyrotechnics and music kicked in, as the MC introduced them to a huge fanfare, and cheers from the fightgoers gathered. Not having much time to fully enjoy the moment, the Ragtags quickly saw their first challenge. 35 simulated goblins and a goblin boss appeared surrounding the heroes.
35 goblins, you're outnumbered 5-1. 35 goblins and that fucking goblin boss.
Oh dear, this is going to hurt. You know, for someone.
Crushing chains. Fearless stand, heroes cry, death embrace, never die.
Yeah.